just recently. There is in place shortly to commence operation, a fully compliant regime to allow cooperation between Australian police agencies and foreign agencies, and nowhere in the international treaty is the sort of expansion of powers that is canvassed in the discussion paper contemplated or required. The overall impression that one is left with from reading this discussion paper is it is simply a naked grab for power by the police forces and the security agency without any attempt to provide the intellectual rigour and justification that one would expect to see to accompany such proposals.
Does anyone else want to make a submission? No, nothing. That's it. Okay, questions? Mr. White?
Look, I really only want to ask, aside from the arguments which I've heard and understand and appreciate, do you have any evidence in relation to the powers that the relevant agencies have at this time are in fact misused?
There was a report in the media in the last few weeks as to a misuse of the warrant communications interception warrant, where it was suggested that the warrant had been obtained in relation to, I think it was 100 individuals, when nearly half of those individuals weren't actually the subject of any investigation. And that's a media report. Of course, it's very hard to get any information about misuse.
I think you're an organisation, a highly respected organisation, known to be interested in civil liberties. I would have thought you'd be the first point of call if people had some complaint or some evidence of misuse.
People, we do get a number of complaints from members of the public who believe that their telecommunications are being intercepted without justification. But it's impossible to work out whether those complaints are justified or not, because all they have is a suspicion that their telecommunications are being intercepted. They assert that they are innocent of any wrongful activity and that investigation of them is not justified. We don't have any investigatory powers as an organisation, and so we're not in a position to work out whether their complaints are justified or not. So I'll go back to the point. It's very difficult to know. And from the supervisory agencies like IGIS and so forth, one doesn't get any real information about whether or not powers have been used inappropriately. In fact, the impression I have from IGIS is that they restrict themselves to process review of the security agency and don't do any merits review of their work at all. So you don't get from that agency any reporting on whether ASIO is intercepting too many communications without justification or not, because they're just looking at process.
Well, I think in terms of the quantification of ASIO's activities, they are a view that sometimes publishing detailed information can in fact give some of the targets that they may be interested in an idea as to whether or not they may in fact be the subject of some attention. I think the argument goes that the amount of work that they actually do is so small, people would assume that they would have very considerable difficulty, in fact, in by the spread of their operation to bring them under observation. But look, I was interested in some of the points that were made about ASIO, and I wondered whether you might be able to tell me what controls that apply to controlled operations you are seeking should apply to counter-terrorism activities.
The first thing is the proposal that ASIO officers should be exempt from the ordinary law is an alarming proposal. And the whole nature of an intelligence organisation is it is supposed to be able to form conclusions from information to which it lawfully has access. And the situation that was exposed in the Supreme Court in New South Wales a few years ago, where ASIO officers had effectively kidnapped someone.
What, in a public park?
In a public park. I know you characterise it that way, but the judge was very critical of the behaviour of the ASIO officers to the point where he thought it was criminal. And the idea that Parliament should overcome...
The security agency should not be able in a public place to talk to somebody without it being characterised as kidnapping. Don't you think they should deserve some protection against...
Well, of course, if somebody wants to talk to ASIO officers in a public park and is voluntarily staying there to do that and not being misled as to the nature of the conversation, that's one thing. But that wasn't the situation that was before the court. And, to overcome that situation by simply exempting ASIO officers from the operation of the law, I think is quite an offensive proposal.
Look, I'll come back to that, Sarah.
I just wanted to take up a point in particular that ASIO officers are required to undertake. Can you see an argument for providing a carefully drawn exemption or limitation of liability for the parties' offences or the conspiracy offences under the Commonwealth Criminal Code? Now, if an ASIO officer undercover participates in a discussion about a possible terrorist crime, and he maintains his participation in that discussion up to a point at which he is satisfied that there is sufficient evidence of criminality that can be referred to the Australian Federal Police, then paradoxically, by his very participation for purposes of evidence gathering, arguably, he could be said to be party to the conspiracy or party to the preparation. Now, it seems to me that those circumstances, the kind of ancillary offences, not the primary offence type of circumstance, there is a rational case for an exemption there. What do you think about that?
Look, I think the scenario that you're putting is a regrettable result of the confusion between a security agency and a police force. That those sorts of investigative roles that you're talking about, Senator, are roles which properly are undertaken by police forces.
No, they're also undertaken by ASIO. Yes, that's one of the things that a national security agency does.
I think that that's taking ASIO functions too far in an inappropriate direction. And
in fact, I'd put it to you that it is a more natural function for ASIO than for the Australian Federal Police, for example, because it is not primarily a law enforcement function. It is a function to gather information to apprehend the commission of a crime. And that's why I'm interested in this paradox of investigative.
but I consider that clearly police work. ASIO was set up to gather intelligence about organisations or individuals in Australia. It shouldn't be in these sort of operations. We even have misgivings about the police being in these sort of controlled operations.
So we let the crime be committed and then we catch them?
No.
Not at all.
But the point is, at least with the police force, the ASIO has, because of its special role as an intelligence gathering organisation, as opposed to a police force, the ASIO agents already have special exemptions in terms of it's a criminal offence to name an ASIO agent. That's those sort of things. Now that follows from the purpose of gathering intelligence. It shouldn't be involved in those sort of organisations. The operation you have described is what I would consider police work, and the sort of work either done by the state or federal police. It's not done by ASIO, and it should not be involved in some sort of sting operation, as these controlled operations basically are. That is police work. That is gathering information which will hopefully lead to a prosecution. That is police work. And the police there is more accountability in the police because of the public nature of their work. And ASIO is in a situation where it has all sorts of protections under its act, all sorts of secrecy under its act, to give an organisation which has been given its secrecy because it says it needs the secrecy to be an intelligence gathering organisation, then to put it into policing work, I think is really dangerous. I think you get into the police area. And I think it says something that we're now talking about this, that ASIO should be doing this sort of work, which is essentially police work.
So ASIO, in the course of its inquiries, obtained certain information. Something is quite imminent. It can be quite imminent, but it has to say, well, we can't take this matter any further. We'll have to take time off and brief the police in order to get them across the matter and to pursue it.
No, it's a question. No, you don't know. What
You don't know that?
No, what it means is that the ASIO agent can't be involved in committing an offence. He can tell the federal police about it, he can tell the state police about it, but he can't. What you're talking about with controlled operations is giving exemptions to officers to break the criminal law.